Well, hello to everybody. What a day, man. What a day. I'm doing coverage of the tournament that was recently played. This tournament is called the Jacques Vouillot Leroux Memorial Tournament. And yeah, man, there was like fire on board, man. You can actually look at some of the videos that we posted on the chess channel, Kasi Chess, and you'll find some content there that relates to the tournament itself. But at this moment, I'd like to look at a game between Jiraan Braaf and Clayton Macheka. This was the game that was played in the round two of the tournament, and man, that was like an amazing game which stood out for me in the tournament. So, without further ado, let's just go into it. Um, they played into a position um, which looks like a Catalan position. And after g3, which is typical of the Catalan, bishop b4 was played. So the bishop checks the king, and the intention is that either you'd like the knight to pounce on here, or you'd like the bishop to be the one that pounces on there because typically they are misplaced on that square. So that's your aim. So bishop d2 was played, and bishop e7 drops back the bishop. So bishop g2, we castle, and basically this bishop is out of place. White would have to move it again, but technically it's not much of an issue for white. But yeah, it's a tempo nonetheless. So c6 is played, and after knight c3, the Catalan move for black, d takes c4. And what White's idea is here is that he'll try to expand on this side in terms of opening some scope for his bishop to operate in the long diagonal, which is typically his plan will be to try and undermine the b7 pawn, which would actually open this diagonal, as I've said already. So, black, on the other hand, he has a pawn. We don't try keeping to the pawn, but black will use the time so that he can develop. And after a4, which is the typical plan, a5 and a6, black responds by c5. And I think this is a technical mistake because, yeah, the knight is supposed to just simply go on to d7 in this position. Knight to d7 is fine, and then you can start thinking about ideas of playing c5. But yeah, in this case, after a4, um, yeah, c5 um, doesn't seem as if it's a good move. But anyway, um, yeah, because it's also assisting in allowing the bishop to achieve its plan. So anyway, d takes c5 was played. Bishop takes c5, and now we expand with the knight. Knight onto e5. And knight c6 is played. And Jiraan decides to actually not take the knight. And after the game, he told me that he was afraid of lines like after knight takes c6, b takes c6, bishop takes c6. He was looking at this activity of the rook bearing down the b2 pawn, and yeah, it's a bit sketchy as to who has the advantage. For example, I'm not sure whether this actually works. Bishop takes f2, rook takes f2, knight g4, and we are looking at this queen b6 idea, hitting the king after the rook moves, and also hitting the bishop as well at the same time. So I'm not sure whether it actually pans out, but these were some of the things that Jiraan expressed that he was actually afraid of. So anyway, going back to the position at hand, Jiraan decided to play knight takes c4, and bishop d7 was played. and I think he's trying to develop his pieces. So bishop g5 is played, hitting this, and the queen will not be able to respond, which is what actually happened. Clayton makes his, I wouldn't say fatal, but a critical mistake. He plays h6, and this is a mistake because when you take with the bishop here, the queen cannot take because it leaves the bishop hanging. So g takes f6 was actually forced, and well, let's see. Knight onto e4 hits the bishop, bishop onto e7, drawing it back, and a5. So white, again, typically of the Catalan, starts to try to expand, undermine this pawn, open this long diagonal towards the rook, and yeah, this is the typical Catalan idea, and it's still relevant in this position as well. So queen c7 is played, a5, and black responds by taking the pawn, and after queen d2, the queen aims at h6. Another critical mistake, and I believe this is a fatal mistake. Clayton plays rook b8, and after the game he expressed that he simply did not see that the queen was actually aiming at the h6 pawn. So queen takes h6, knight onto d4, hitting the knight, and at the same time hitting the e2 pawn, and knight onto e3. And after this knight takes e2, king onto h1, we have a problem here because the queen and the knight are coordinating on f5. So how to stop this threat? Um, Black was perhaps, I think, supposed to play a move like f5, even stopping like possibilities of knight g4. But after the fatal mistake that he made, which is queen onto e5, the game was simply over. Knight onto g4, and all of a sudden you can see, oops, sorry, you can actually see that the two knights are coordinating there on f6. There's no way to bring a third defender to this pawn, and after the knight takes, bishop takes, knight takes, black would have to concede his queen. So a very nice game, nice performance by Jiraan Braaf in this game. Nice and smooth, and yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. Extremely positional, somewhat Kapovian, but at the same time, yeah, critical mistakes by Clayton, and yeah, man, this was fire. This was fire for me. So anyway, subscribe, guys, to Gussie Chess, and yeah, we'll see you in the next tournaments and the next videos as well.